As Sylvester sang the final note of Dance, Disco Heat, a scream from the crowd pierced through the music. But this scream was different. Sharp. Panic-filled. Someone passed out. Help! Sylvester pulled his hand away from the microphone and saw movement in the crowd. People were pulling back, a space was forming, and someone was lying on the ground in the middle. The 3,000-person crowd split in two in an instant. One side was still dancing, the other was pulling back in panic. Sylvester waited for the music to stop. But the orchestra kept playing, stage protocol demanded it. But Sylvester stopped. "Cut the music," he shouted into the microphone. And then he did it. Instead of the stage stairs, he jumped straight off the stage. When his platform heels hit the ground, the click sound echoed through the amphitheater. Security guards looked at each other in shock. Because no artist would do this. In the middle of the dance floor, a young man was shaking in his friend's arms. He was clutching his chest, struggling to breathe. People around him were shouting, "Ambulance! Someone call an ambulance," but nobody knew what to do. But Sylvester knew. Because he too had once collapsed on a club floor, exactly like that. And that night, nobody had come to save him. To follow this story to the end and not miss similar content, please remember to subscribe. It was June 1979, and the San Francisco War Memorial Opera House was beating like the heart of disco music. Those years were special for San Francisco. The city had become the center of the sexual freedom movement, and after Harvey Milk's assassination a year earlier, it was rising as a symbol of resistance for the LGBTQ community. Sylvester was considered the musical voice of that resistance. With his falsetto vocal style, androgynous appearance, and stage performance, he wasn't just a singer, he was a manifesto. Nobody had to pretend to be someone they weren't, at least not at Sylvester's concerts. That night, the opera house was packed. When he took the stage, the crowd went wild. "Tonight, in this hall, we are all free," he said. But nobody knew that Sylvester had cried for hours backstage before going on stage that night. Because that morning he had received news from the hospital, test results had come in and the doctors wanted to see him again within a week. Back then, AIDS wasn't widely known yet, but Sylvester knew. Patrick Cowley, one of his closest friends and musical partner, had contracted a mysterious illness a few months earlier. Doctors couldn't put a name to it, but the symptoms were terrible. And Sylvester was starting to see the same signs in his own body. But he had gone on stage that night. Because for him, performing wasn't just a job, it was a way of staying alive. As Sylvester walked into the crowd, the people around him slowly parted to either side. There was a strange silence. The young man was maybe 20, his hair soaked with sweat, face pale, clutching his chest. His eyes were full of fear. Sylvester knelt down beside him. It was difficult to crouch in platform heels, but he didn't care. The knees of his sequin costume scraped against the cold stone floor of the opera house. He placed his hand on the young man's forehead and whispered, "Calm down. I'm here. You're not alone." But the young man still couldn't breathe. His lips were turning purple. Security guards moved slowly through the crowd. An ambulance had been called, but traffic meant 10 minutes. 10 minutes was too long. Sylvester made a decision in that moment. He didn't know if it was right or wrong, but he trusted his instincts. He laid the young man on the ground, tilted his head back slightly, and tried to clear his airway. "Is he a doctor?" someone shouted. "No, that's Sylvester." But he wasn't listening. In 1972, he had lived through the same thing at a club in Los Angeles. That night, no one had helped. Now, it was his turn. The young man's chest was rising and falling slightly. It wasn't too late yet. Sylvester applied gentle pressure to his chest. The crowd watched in silence. In that moment, he wasn't a disco queen, he was just a human being, trying to save another person's life. Security guards finally reached them. One of them touched Sylvester's shoulder and said, "We'll handle this." But Sylvester didn't get up. He looked at the young man and into his eyes. There was something familiar in those eyes, fear, loneliness, fear of rejection. Sylvester knew that fear very well. "You're not alone," he repeated. "I won't leave you." But the security guard insisted. "The ambulance is on its way, you can return to the stage." Sylvester looked at him. His voice was calm but firm. "I'm staying here until the ambulance arrives." For 7 minutes, Sylvester stayed by his side, holding his hand, humming songs. No one laughed. The entire opera house had formed a protective circle. When the paramedics arrived, the young man looked a little better. He was breathing, color had returned to his face. "What did you do?" a paramedic asked. "I just stayed with him." The paramedic smiled. "Sometimes that's enough." They laid the young man on a stretcher and started taking him toward the ambulance. Just as they were leaving, the young man turned his head and looked at Sylvester. His lips moved but no sound came out. But Sylvester understood what he said, "Thank you." Sylvester couldn't hold back his tears. Because in that moment he realized this wasn't just about saving that young man's life. It was about healing his own past. That night in 1972, when nobody helped him as he lay on the ground, every moment he was rejected, every second he felt alone, he let all of it go in that instant. And something changed inside him. The crowd gave a standing ovation. But this time, the applause was different, not cheers, but deep respect and love. Sylvester took the microphone. His throat was tight. "Tonight, you reminded me of something. Sometimes it takes more than a song. Sometimes, it's just about being there." The crowd listened in silence. And Sylvester continued, "That young man wasn't alone tonight. Because all of you were there. Like a family. And that's why this community is special. That's why we're here. That's why we dance. Because the world outside tells us we're alone. But we know we're not." The concert went on, but it was different now. People were dancing for each other. And Sylvester truly saw them, not just a stage icon, but one of them. But Sylvester didn't know one thing: he knew nothing about the young man he had saved that night. Who he was, where he went, what happened to him, nothing. The ambulance had taken him away and that was it. Sylvester thought about calling the hospital in the following days, but what would he say? "I'm asking about an anonymous young man?" He didn't even have a name, he couldn't even fully remember his face. He only remembered those eyes, full of fear, desperate, lost. Sylvester made a promise: he would never leave anyone alone again. Every concert became that promise. Every song a reminder, you're not alone. But he never learned what happened to that young man. At least, not while he was alive. As Sylvester watched the ambulance drive away that night, he didn't know one thing: that young man's life had split in two at that very moment. At the hospital, he was registered as an anonymous young man. Sylvester only knew he was alive. The rest was unknown. Sylvester thought about him often. At concerts, his eyes scanned the crowd. Maybe he was there. He could only hope. And hope was sometimes enough. In the mid-1980s, Sylvester was sitting backstage. He had just received news from the doctors: he was HIV positive. Time was running out. And in that moment, one thought was in his head: what happened to the young man I saved that night? Was it worth it for me? He couldn't find the answer. Because that young man never appeared again. At least, as far as Sylvester knew. But the truth was much more complicated. And much more beautiful. The time just hadn't come yet. From 1979 to 1988, Sylvester was at his peak. But the AIDS epidemic was spreading. He lost Patrick Cowley, then others. Yet he never left the stage. He kept saying, "You matter. I am with you." In 1987, he publicly announced his illness. On the Joan Rivers Show, live on air, he said, "Yes, I have AIDS. And yes, I'm still here. And yes, I'm still singing. Because this disease can't take my voice." But day by day, it started to take his voice. In the fall of 1988, Sylvester was struggling to breathe. His lungs had weakened, his body was exhausted. Doctors told him to leave the stage. Your body can't take it, they said. But Sylvester was stubborn. One more concert, he said. Just one more. December 1988. His last concert at Dreamland nightclub, San Francisco. A small venue, a few hundred loyal fans who'd followed his entire career. Fans. The applause didn't stop. For 5 minutes, people applauded, cried, shouted. Sylvester stood there, tears streaming, smiling. When he took the microphone, his voice was raspy. But the words were clear: "You are my family. You are my love. And tonight, for the last time, I will dance with you." DJ Steve Fabus had prepared a special set. With each song, Sylvester remembered a memory: the first time he took the stage, the first time he was applauded, the first time someone said, "We love you. You make me feel played." Sylvester's voice cracked, his breath cut off. But the crowd sang for him, 300 people, one voice, one heart. And Sylvester stood in the middle of the stage, eyes closed, just listening. And in that moment he understood: the song no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the people. And it would live forever. When the concert ended, Sylvester couldn't leave the stage. His legs wouldn't hold him. Security guards wanted to help him, but he refused. "One more minute," he said. And he sat there, at the edge of the stage, watching the crowd. People were slowly leaving, but nobody was running, nobody was hurrying. It was as if nobody wanted that moment to end. Sylvester closed his eyes. He remembered that night from 9 years ago. "I wonder what happened," he thought. He didn't know the answer, but he knew what he had done was right. But Sylvester was wrong. Because that young man hadn't forgotten. On the contrary, he remembered everything. Every word, every touch, every moment. And at that moment, outside Dreamland nightclub, in the dark, that young man, no longer a young man, was waiting. Gathering courage. Trying to decide whether to go in or not. Because he had something to tell Sylvester. Something very important. But the door closed. The lights went out. And he was too late. 9 days later, Sylvester died. And that man was left with the words he couldn't say. But the story didn't end there. In fact, the story was just beginning. December 16, 1988. Sylvester died at 41. Thousands attended his San Francisco funeral, not a mourning, but a celebration. Colorful clothes, songs, dancing. "Don't cry for me," he'd said. "Dance for me." Not just at concerts, but in everyday life too. People were now rushing to help. A change. A hope. Dozens spoke: friends, musicians, fans. But one person was missing: that young man from 1979. Nobody knew who he was. Maybe he'd forgotten. Maybe he was gone. Nobody wanted to think about it. But at the back of the funeral area, outside the crowd, a man was standing. Wearing a trench coat, glasses, silent. Nobody paid attention to him. Nobody saw him crying. And nobody knew he was carrying a letter in his pocket, written to Sylvester, but never sent. That man left from there. And remained silent for years. Because the time hadn't come yet. But one day he would speak. And when that day came, everyone would listen. The year 1995. 7 years after Sylvester's death. A big memorial concert was being prepared at the San Francisco War Memorial Opera House. The organizers were inviting old fans, collecting memories. And one day, a letter arrived at the office. Handwritten, in shaky letters. "My name is Michael. In 1979, Sylvester saved me. But nobody knows the whole story. Can I speak at the memorial concert?" The organizers called Michael. They wanted to meet him. They wanted to hear his story. And Michael, for the first time, 16 years later, told everything. That night at the Opera House, he was 20. A college student from a conservative Catholic family. They didn't know he was gay. He'd come secretly, they thought he was at the library. But in the middle of the dance floor, all that lying, all that hiding, all that suppressed fear collapsed on his chest. He couldn't breathe. His heart raced. And the world went dark. He woke to a nurse. "We called your family." Michael's heart stopped. His wallet had everything: student ID, address, emergency contact. His mother. His mother came. Face like stone. Long silence. Then Michael started crying. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I'm sorry. I. And his mother held his hand. "Hush," she said. "Don't speak." But her voice wasn't angry. It was fragile. Then she said, "The doctors told me everything. Where you were. That club. Those people." She paused. "And a man came. Jumped off the stage. Helped you. His name was Sylvester." Michael nodded. "Yes. He saved me." His mother looked at him. Her eyes were filled with tears. "No, Michael. You were killing yourself. By lying to us. By lying to yourself. And that man, that Sylvester, gave you life. But now it's my turn. I'm here too. And I won't leave you." That night in the hospital, Michael had his first real conversation with his mother. He told her about his fears, his loneliness, his identity. His mother cried. She cried a lot. But she listened. And finally she said, "I love you. In every way. And that won't change." Michael wanted to thank Sylvester. But how? He was famous, unreachable. Months later, he wrote to Fantasy Records. No response came. Maybe it never reached him. 1988, Michael went to Sylvester's final concert. Hours outside Dreamland, unable to decide. What would he say? Would thank you be enough after 9 years? Would Sylvester remember? He listened to the concert from outside, leaning against the wall. He heard the applause, the music, the love coming from inside. And he cried. Because Sylvester was dying. And Michael would be left with words he couldn't say. Concert ended. Michael gathered courage, walked to the door. "Concert's over," security said. "But I need Sylvester can't see anyone." Door closed. 9 days later, Sylvester died. And Michael never got to say thank you. He never got to tell him how important he was. He never got to tell him, "You didn't just save my life. You gave me a life worth living." Or so he thought. A week after the funeral, an envelope arrived. Sylvester's lawyer. Inside, a handwritten letter in shaky script. Michael's hands shook opening it. Addressed to him. Michael. Sylvester had remembered. Always. And left him something. When Michael read the letter, the world stopped. Sylvester's voice was coming from the paper. "Michael. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. But you are. And that's enough for me. In 1979, they took you to the hospital. I couldn't learn your name. I didn't know your address. But I never forgot you. Because that night, you reminded me of something: the meaning of life is being there for each other." Years later, a letter came. To Fantasy Records. Your signature was on it, Michael. In your letter you wrote, "You saved me. I'm now at peace with my family. I'm happy now." When I read that letter, I cried. Because I understood, I didn't just save you. You saved me. Since then, before every concert, I read that letter. Every time I struggled, every time I suffered, every time I wanted to give up, I remembered your words. And I continued. Now I'm leaving. But you're staying. And I have one request of you: be there in my place. For others. Because the world needs it. You need it. We all need it. Keep dancing. Keep loving. And never forget, you are not alone. With love, Sylvester. When Michael finished reading the letter, tears were dripping onto the paper. Because he understood, Sylvester had remembered him. He had always remembered. And now, Michael's mission was clear. When the night of the memorial concert came, Michael waited in the bathroom for hours before going on stage. His hands were shaking. After 16 years, for the first time, he would tell everyone the truth. His family, his friends, the world. Who he was. What he experienced. What Sylvester did for him. Was he scared? Yes. But Sylvester's words from the letter were spinning in his head, be there in my place. For others. When he took the stage, the War Memorial Opera House was packed again, just like that night in 1979. But this time Sylvester wasn't on stage. Instead, there were dozens of artists performing his songs. Martha Wash and Izora Rhodes had sung You Make Me Feel. The crowd had given a standing ovation. Tears had flowed like a river. Now it was Michael's turn. He took the microphone. His voice was shaking but determined. Good evening. My name is Michael. And 16 years ago, in the middle of this hall, I died. And Sylvester brought me back to life. The crowd fell silent. Everyone looked at Michael. And he began to tell everything. The hospital. His mother. Coming out. The letter. Sylvester's response. The final concert. The missed opportunity. And the letter that came after death. When he spoke his last sentence, his voice cracked. Sylvester didn't just give me life. He gave me a reason to live. And now I will carry his message, be there for each other. Always. Unconditionally. The crowd stood up. Applause, screams, tears. And in that moment, the disco ball hanging from the opera house ceiling spun again. The lights sparkled. And Dance, Disco Heat began to play. But this time people weren't just dancing. People were hugging each other. Strangers were holding hands. Because that night, everyone was family. Michael walked to the side of the stage and pulled a curtain. Behind it was a giant photograph, a frame from that 1979 night. In the photo, Sylvester was shown, crouching on the ground in his blue sequin costume, placing his hand on a young man's forehead. That young man was Michael. The photo was blurry because it was taken in the dark, but the emotions were clear. This is it, Michael said. This is Sylvester's legacy. Not a song. Not a costume. A movement. He taught us this: the greatest power is taking care of each other. And tonight, I promise you, I will continue this movement. Every day, every moment, I will be there for someone. Because Sylvester was there for me. But the real story started here. Because after Sylvester died, that small act he did, stopping the concert in 1979 to help a fan, turned into a wave. As people heard that story, they started doing similar things themselves. When someone felt faint at concerts, people no longer remained passive. People helped. Artists stopped the music. The crowd made way. Not just at concerts, but in everyday life too. People were now rushing to help. Because Sylvester had shown them this: stopping takes courage. Helping takes strength. But the most important thing is being there. In the early 1990s, a group of young activists in San Francisco founded an organization. Its name, Sylvester's Circle. The organization's purpose was simple: to have volunteer health workers at concerts and events, to ensure people had fun safely. The first year they started with only 5 volunteers. 10 years later, there were hundreds of volunteers across America. Michael was one of the founders. He trained thousands of people and set up health booths at hundreds of events. And each time, he told people the same thing: look out for each other. See each other. Don't leave each other alone. Years passed. New generations discovered Sylvester. You Make Me Feel became popular again. And Michael continued to tell his story. He went to schools, spoke at conferences. And each time he conveyed the same message: Sylvester wasn't just a singer. He was a teacher. He taught us empathy, courage, love. Sylvester's impact spread worldwide. Artists followed his example. When a fan fainted at Beyoncé's concert, she stopped the music. Adele made a similar move. When Harry Styles noticed a fan having a panic attack, he left the stage. Each time, the media called it the Sylvester Effect. And people learned, fame is not more important than saving a person's life. In 2019, a monument was erected in Castro. The inscription beneath it read, "The greatest performance takes place in life." Michael was 60 years old. He stood before the monument and touched the bronze. Everything came rushing back. "Thank you," he whispered. In 2023, Michael had a heart attack. While lying in the hospital, Sarah came to visit him, a Sylvester's Circle volunteer. "You taught me to be there for others," she said. "Now I'm here for you." The circle was complete. When Michael left the hospital, he went to the War Memorial Opera House. The doors were closed, but he stood outside and looked at the building. That night replayed in his mind, the music, the lights, the fear, Sylvester's hand on his forehead, his voice in his ear, "You're not alone." And now, 44 years later, he still wasn't alone. Because Sylvester's spirit, that movement, that love, was still alive. In every concert hall, on every street, everywhere, when someone was there for someone, Sylvester was there too. Today, in 2025, 37 years have passed since Sylvester's death. But his story is still being told. Because that story isn't just an artist's story. It's humanity's story. Empathy, courage, love, proof that these still exist, that they're still powerful. Michael is 66 years old now. He's still active in Sylvester's Circle. He's still giving lectures, telling stories. And each time, he gives the same message: look out for each other. See each other. Be there. And people are listening. Because this message is more important than ever. In today's world, divided, polarized, lonely, Sylvester's movement is a reminder: the greatest power is in each other. Every year in June, the Sylvester Memorial Night is held. There's one rule: if someone falls ill, everyone stops and helps. Each year, Michael says, 44 years ago, Sylvester gave me life. He showed us this: the greatest performance is being there for others. And then the music starts. "You Make Me Feel," Mighty Real, plays. People dance. But this time it's not just a song. It's a promise, a vow, a movement, love, empathy, humanity. And in the opera house ceiling, the disco ball spins. Reflects its lights in every direction. And those lights illuminate not just the walls, but hearts. Because Sylvester's light will shine forever. If this story taught you one thing, it's this: the most important thing in life is being there for each other. Sylvester showed this in 1979. Michael lived it for 44 years. And now it's your turn. Next time someone falls on the street, stop. When someone needs help, reach out. When someone feels alone, be there. Because the greatest change starts with small actions. And that action can start with you. Sylvester's story is over. But his movement continues. And you can be part of that movement. All you have to do is be there. Dance. Love. And never forget, none of us are alone.